In last week's episode, we talked about the metaphor of consuming media and how it relates to Stuart Hall's theory of encoding and decoding. Let's see what you had to say. Adam Telfer on our Facebook page talks about how consumption and encoding/decoding can kind of maybe happen at the same time, and that one does not necessarily necessitate the other, and makes a comparison between decoding and being a foodie, that, you know, if you are decoding something, you are trying to find the details within it, you're sort of searching, you're being introspective, you're being curious, maybe a little bit critical, and I think that in a certain sense this is absolutely true, and I think that you know, is definitely true when you're doing, say, oppositional readings or even negotiated readings. I think it's less true when you are operating inside what we refer to as the dominant code, and that the degree to which you are able to just take in or view, consume, you know, a media message and decode it without thinking about it and just get what the creators have put into it, you know, that is still decoding, even if it is completely passive. It's just, you don't have to put a lot of work into it because your code is really similar to the code of the people who made that piece of media. And so this is a thing that I think we'll return to a couple times throughout this comment response, this idea that even if you feel like a passive audience member and you don't feel like you're really digging into something, you're still in effect decoding it. This is also interesting given Joe Edwardo's comment, also on the Facebook, directly underneath Adam's, where he mentions fine art and the process of perhaps decoding fine art. And again, I want to stress that, you know, Stuart Hall was mostly writing about television and from the perspective of, you know, an audience member looking at the media complex that is a television program. But, you know, I'm definitely not against trying to apply this kind of thing to fine art. And that is a thing that I think for a lot of people, it feels like you have to do this active kind of decoding. You have to be critical. You have to be self-introspective, and that takes a lot of work. And if you're not willing to do it, or if you feel like you don't have the tools, then the art isn't for you, or you are not the intended audience. And, you know, this is probably not going to come as a surprise. I don't feel like that's the case. I feel like whatever kind of knee-jerk gut reaction, you know, decoding that you bring to an inscrutable seeming piece of fine art is still legitimate, is still meaningful, and is still, you're still doing what that fine art is asking you to do. Just you might not be getting what the person who made it put into it, which is all right. I feel like that's, you know, that's at least more understood on the fine art level than it tends to be on the mass communication, mass media level. TocTheEternal on the subreddit writes a really great comment and starts a really great conversation around something that I wanted to spend some time on in the episode. We didn't really have the space, and it's also a little bit of a rehashing of a point that we made in our first But Wait video, and that's the degree to which the metaphor of consumption is related in some maybe abstract way to economies or economics. And, you know, we talked about this with regards to They Live. You know, we made this They Live joke, and the joke there is, right, conform, consume, obey. And that as a consumer of things, you are kind of a subject to economies, and that the idea of consumption is maybe part of this like market hegemony, that it has a sense of authority, it has a sense of, you know, resource, requirement almost. And I think that is absolutely a whole other branch of the effective capability of this metaphor. And yeah, this was a great comment. Thanks for writing this. Kidasquid and AIexTheTutor both tackle the what is the calorie of media question that I sort of offhandedly posed, and their responses are really great, super interesting. I would highly recommend giving them a read and giving it a think. I think, you know, what it boils down to, it seems, is that really media is almost the opposite of calories, that it is the work that you must do in order to consume and not what you get from consumption. I would say that there is maybe a kind of affective calorie that exists within media, that there is a unit of emotional affect that is contained within a message, and so then you gotta figure out like what a message is and what's, like where are the bounds of a message versus a program and like all this other stuff. But I think that that's the line of thought that I started going down over the last week. But these are two other different and I think equally valid lines of thought. So yeah, worth the read. Shadowrunner and My Life is an RPG take issue with my statement that when you consume media, it doesn't go away. And while they both agree that the physical media itself doesn't degrade upon use in a sort of meaningful sense, what they both seem to agree on is that what does get used up is the experience of that media. And that is in fact what is being consumed. You're consuming sort of the meaning of a thing. And that even if you go back to it again and the media itself hasn't changed, hasn't gone away, the meaning that you have taken from it has been consumed. And in the second viewing, you are maybe consuming a different set of meanings. You are consuming a different set of ideas, and you are removing those, and so on and so forth down the line for every rewatch. And I think that this is a really smart read. I think that this is a great way to look at this, and really got me thinking. And I think I still disagree. And the reason I disagree is that for me, I don't think of that process of taking meaning from a piece of media as destructive in the same way that consuming food is destructive. I think of it actually as constructive, that instead of taking meaning and removing it from whatever the media is, going back, it's no longer there because I already took it, so I have to take new meaning. Going back, these two are now gone, I have to take new meaning. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm actually building upon each meaning that I have found in it every time. It's still there, but there are cracks in it, or there are these little shadows that I didn't investigate. There are, corners of the complex that I never wandered into. And so instead of removing something and then trying to find what's still remaining after I've removed it, I'm instead sort of building upon what I've already found. How that relates to the decoding metaphor, I think, we'll take another couple minutes that we won't spend right now, but yeah, I think that it can be done. We have 2 more t-shirts and a hoodie in the works, but and a mug someday. Maybe this is like the 5th t-shirt down the line. Idea channel content decoder. Maybe we should make decoder rings. Avizanski points out another extension of the consumption metaphor, which is people's taste in things, which I don't know that they're directly related, but definitely part of the same conversation, and also a really important guiding metaphor for the, our media diet. The Lord President talks about the practicalities of decoding media and what it means for audiences to either actively search for meaning in a piece of media, or to just sit back and, accept what's given to them without engaging with it critically. And I think that the thing that we need to sort of wrap our brains around is that in both of those situations, an audience member is decoding. It's just the degree to which they decode and how active a role they want to take in it. And I think that the situations where one must very actively and critically decode, and you kind of have no choice, would be like, maybe an art house film that doesn't give you much on its face. You have to really sort of try to meet the creator where they are encoding their media. I think also a lot of foreign media, no matter how sort of mundane or quotidian it is, sort of requires you to decode a little harder, not just because you don't speak the language and the signs are unfamiliar, but because there are all kinds of sets of meanings and actions and tropes that you're just not familiar with. So even just trying to figure out what's going on, like, is this news? Is this comedy? Is this whatever? You sort of have to decode a little bit. But if you're gonna sit down and you're gonna watch like CNN, it's very possible that you would sit down, you would get some information and be done. And you have still decoded CNN. It's just CNN sort of meets you more on your level. And that's the point of CNN. CNN wants you to think that CNN is meeting you on CNN's level, and not to just pick on CNN. That's true of every cable news, everything ever. As local gets. Shessomickey points out the usefulness of the negotiated code when people are operating inside fandom and are using pre-existing encodings and media messages for, sort of different purposes. And I think this is a great point. Also, hi, Amanda. Kayla Jeanson wrote a really great comment that really got me thinking about dance and dancers, and how dance performers are often called interpreters because of their relationship to a choreographer's work. They are interpreting it. And this really got me thinking about whether or not we can say that audience is in some way a metaphor on the level of consumption or decoding, because I haven't dug too deep. This was like dawning on me on the way over here, that insofar as the audience is understood as a group of people who are all facing the same direction, beholding some performance, whether live or mediated, does that somehow contain in it the idea that they are passive? When in fact, so much of the media theory that we've been talking about, and the media theory that is being done, is about trying to reassert the inherent interactivity of an audience. And that's true in the arts, in media, in performance, in anything where there is an audience, and that maybe interpreter is a more appropriate thing to call an audience member than an audience member. And I like there's sort of an additional aspect to this, which is that, interpreters are on stage with one another, working from one another, developing a kind of rapport. And I think that that's also true in audience, but is not sort of fundamentally understood through the simple and straightforward idea of what that word means. So yeah, there's a lot there. Leave you something to chew on, I guess. All right, see you soon.